Good evening, everyone. This is Marissa Bartley, your Eastern Region Vice President for NULYP, and we are getting ready to celebrate our 15-year anniversary, and we thought it would be fun to go back a little bit and reflect on our history and some of the giants that have come before us. So my first giant we have is Lanisha Anderson, and we're going to talk to her just a little bit about her NULYP journey, how she got involved with the organization, and what she's doing today. And hopefully she'll give us a couple tidbits on what we can do to make sure that we are living the legacy that she started for us a couple years ago. So with that, let me introduce Miss Lanisha Anderson. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Marissa. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself now. So where are you working? What part of the country are you located in? Just give us a little bit of history on you.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say I'm honored to be joining you. Thank you so much for reaching out and allowing me to share some of my history and love of the National Urban League and the young professionals. So definitely honored to be here with you. So I am, again, my name is Lanisha Anderson, and I am currently the Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for ABM Industries Incorporated. ABM is a Fortune 600 publicly traded company that does facilities management across the country and also internationally. We are headquartered in New York, but we have significant operations in Houston, which is where I reside today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, I do want to go back a little bit before you were with the law firm. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you got started. I personally love this story because it starts where I got started. So a little bit of Pittsburgh love there. But if you could tell us how you got started and when your NULYP journey began with regard to being on the national board as well.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully I don't age myself here. So from a career perspective, I started out as a very junior lawyer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right out of law school, going to work at a large law firm by the name of K&L Gates. And as my experience in Pittsburgh is where I met Marissa. And to stay on that track from a professional standpoint, and then I'll back up and talk about my Urban League and Young Professionals experience. But after I left Pittsburgh, I stayed there for a number of years, and then after I left Pittsburgh, went to Sprint Nextel, which many of you know is a telecommunications wireless company. Went in-house to be one of their lawyers, supporting the wireless business in the sales and marketing. And so I did that in Kansas City for a number of years. And then an opportunity presented itself to move to Houston and work for Shell Oil Company. So I did that and had a number of roles within Shell, including a year and a half I spent in the Middle East helping develop one of our largest capital projects called a gas to liquids project. I did that in the Middle East for a year and a half, did a number of other roles with them, all within legal, and then an opportunity presented itself to come to ABM, which is where I am today. I've been here about a year and a half. And I serve as basically general counsel for two of the divisions and business units within. So that's sort of my professional background. Now, what I love talking about is my experience with the Urban League. So I'll back up. Actually, my experience with the Urban League predates the Young Professionals, and a lot of people don't know that. I was actually a new lighter, which is the high school program in the Urban League, and I did that in high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is where I'm originally from. I helped found the chapter of the New Lights in Tulsa, Oklahoma, me and a group of other young people, and then eventually became the president of that chapter. And so very involved with the Urban League in high school, then went off to college and did in St. Louis and volunteered with the Urban League, but at the time there really wasn't a program for college students, which I think just shows you from a historical perspective that even then when I was in college there was a need and a desire to bring in young professionals and young people and get them plugged into the movement. So I did that not necessarily in an official capacity, but just because of the good things that I continue to see with what the Urban League is doing. So did some volunteering when I was in St. Louis and at a university level. And then once I got out of law school, I moved to Pittsburgh, as I mentioned, and was working for a firm, and was approached by a number of people at the affiliate in Pittsburgh and asked to join a group of young professionals who were starting this chapter of the National Urban League Young Professionals. And at the time, I didn't know much about the young professionals or what they were doing and what they were about, but I knew that I really admired the work that the Urban League did in communities across the country. And, I thought if I have the opportunity to be a part of that, I certainly want to. And I recall walking into this room with about 25 to 30 people, and as I got to meet them and got to know them, it's a really dynamic group of young professionals, very driven, very sharp. And I remember thinking, what in the world, how did I end up being in this room? But nevertheless, somebody saw something in me, which, to this day I'm very thankful for. So I became one of the founding members of the Pittsburgh chapter of the Urban League Young Professionals. And we elected officers. I became the organization's first vice president. And, we set up bylaws, and we set up the organization, and we brought members in. And so I'm very proud of the work that we did a number of years ago when I was in Pittsburgh. And so as a result of doing that work, I got involved at the national level. The Pittsburgh, the local affiliate, hosted the conference the year after I joined the young professionals. And so as a result, I got an opportunity to interact with a number of the national officers, and was encouraged to consider a national leadership role, which I did. I became the chair of policies and procedures, which I think was a good fit for me as a lawyer. So I did that for a number of years. And then, the opportunity presented itself to serve on the National Urban League's Board of Trustees. So as you know, the national organization has a group of trustees that help with the governance of the national organization. They have a number of positions on that board that are required to be under the age of 35. And so while I'm not under the age of 35 today, at the time that I was asked to join, I was under the age of 35, and so they asked me to come on board as under 35 trustee, which I was honored to do. I served on that board for 6 years in that capacity. And because of my involvement on the Board of Trustees, the National Urban League Young Professionals organization has 2 members at large on the executive board. And those 2 members at large have historically been on the National Urban League Board of Trustees. And part of the history of that is, now the national YP president has a seat on the board, and so that's a really good thing. It's obviously something that we were thrilled to see happen. But at the time that the YP organization, that opportunity was not there. And so I think the thinking was, we really want to make sure that we're plugged into the mission and what's going on a day-to-day basis with the national organization. So to have 2 board of trustees that serve on the executive board of the YPs was really a good way to make sure that connection stayed current. So I did that for a number of years, and actually just recently, I rolled off a couple of years ago. I'd served my 2 terms, and just recently was asked to rejoin the board in November, not as under 35 trustee anymore, but just as a regular trustee. So I'm thrilled to be able to serve in that capacity again.
Awesome. So I think you've kind of showed us how your professional career has helped the Urban League, but can you kind of flip it a little bit and let us know maybe how your Urban League leadership experience has helped you in your 9-to-5?
Oh, absolutely. I am constantly telling people about the wonderful things that I learned and my journey through the Urban League and how it's helped me professionally. And, I could go on and on. There's a myriad of things. It taught me how to do project management. It taught me how to prioritize from a time management standpoint. It taught me organizational skills. It taught me how to work with a group of diverse disciplines, right? And so when you're working on a board, you have some people that have legal experience, you have some people that have HR background, you have people that have a finance background. And so you really have to learn how to take the skills that everyone brings to the table and be able to hone those to get a finished product. And that's one of the things I learned very early on in the movement. But, I also learned a lot of intangibles, right? So I learned things like how to, how to work with the team, how to, lead a team. I also learned how to follow. You always hear so much about leadership and how you have to hone your leadership skill, but part of being a good leader, I think, is learning how also to follow. And so there are times when, even though I was in a leadership capacity, I wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to, the broader organization and understanding what their needs were and letting them to some extent lead us where we needed to be so that we could stay current. And now my lights have gone off. in my office, so excuse me one second.
That's okay.
All right, Jeremy, edit that out. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I mean, so I would say, I mean, all of those things were really helpful. But I would also say that I got a lot of personal fulfillment out of it. I mean, the Urban League does so much for our community. And you know, when I was growing up, my dad was a minister of a church, my mother was the first lady of a church, and so they always taught me that, you know, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I've been very fortunate in my career, my personal life, and my professional life that I felt like it's always been incumbent upon me to give back. And the Urban League has always been a venue in which I could do that. And so from a personal fulfillment standpoint, the league has always been a great outlet for me to feel like I am giving back to my community in a small way, but in a way that was very beneficial to me.
Awesome. So I think you did capture one good piece of advice in that when you're a leader, sometimes you need to know when to follow. And I think all good leadership has had to follow at some point so that you know what it looks like. But if you could give the NULYP leaders and members, you know, one piece of advice, what do you think that thing would be from you?
You know, there are so many things that I think the YP leadership does so well today, and so I'm so proud of the leadership and the things that it seems like you guys have learned. A couple really quick points. You know, it's really important, I think, to know the history of the organization. And so not only just the young professionals history, which, you know, at this point, 15 years in, there is a very rich history for the young professionals, which I think is absolutely critical for not only any leader, but any member in the organization. You have to know, you know, why we were born, why were we created, what we were hoping to accomplish when this first came up, and to just make sure that we don't repeat history, but we learn from it. But also learning the National Urban League history. You know, it's so important, I think, to understand what programs we offer, what the value is, to be able to articulate that to people. You know, so often, you know, people have heard of the Urban League, but they really don't know what we do. And there's so many invaluable programs and opportunities that we give to communities across the country. And I think it's incumbent upon us to know not only the things that we're doing today, but the things that we have historically done and who we are as an organization. So I'd say that, I mean, obviously is one really good piece. But I'd say secondly is to spend time really learning about the affiliates. So, you know, even at a national organization, what we do is so critical. But the real point of service, the programs that we offer are at the local affiliates. And there's, you know, approximately 100 around the country, and every affiliate is doing something unique and different that's catered to their community. And so I always try to spend time with the local leadership to understand what is it that you're doing, what is it that you view as valuable for your community, what are your needs, how can we help, and then try to internalize that and figure out a way that the young professionals can help with whatever those needs are.
Okay, awesome. Now, my final question for you is, we are in our 15th year, and as an alumnus, what is your vision for NULYP for year 20?
Yeah, good question. So I would say, you know, what I would love to see in the young professionals in 3 to 5 years, to some extent we're already doing. I sort of already see it bearing fruit, but I'd love to see it expanded upon. You know, when I got to learn more about the young professionals and as I committed time into the organization, you know, a group of us got together and said, you know, wouldn't it really be great from a succession planning standpoint if the young professionals could grow into leading the local affiliates? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the YP leadership could grow into leading either the national organization or serving on the board? And so you see some of that because we have some alumnus that are now running local affiliates. And it's amazing to see sort of how they approach those roles and the value and the richness of what they can bring to the experience because they had the benefit of growing up in the Urban League like I did. And so for me, I think 3 to 5 years out, I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see more of our YPs actually being president and CEOs of local affiliates, or being on the board or being chair of the board of their local affiliate, or, you know, even being on the national board. So that's one piece. But I think sort of secondarily is, you know, one of the things that we always talk about is professional development. And so the YPs really are the next generation of not only leaders within the National Urban League movement, but they're also, I think, leaders in their respective industry, right? We have the most talented young professionals in the country. I always feel like we're the premier young professionals organization in the country, and we should really believe that and internalize that. And so I would love to not only see us leading in the Urban League movement, but I also would love to see us leading in industry, leading in government, leading in the, you know, nonprofit sector outside of the Urban League. I really think we have the talent in our organization to be champions in whatever it is that we're doing. And so I'd love to see more of that in 3 to 5 years as well.
Awesome. So my Urban League family, you've heard it, we need to make sure that we are the best, because we are already referred to as the premier young professional organization. So we now need to make sure we own that title. And you heard it first from Miss Lanisha Anderson. So I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy workday to get on this technology with me and have this conversation, because I think it's really important not only that we know our history, but we know who our history makers are. And you have definitely been one of them for us for this movement. So we really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you in Cincinnati.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you again. I'm always honored to talk to young professionals.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.